Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be sharing my time with the member from Mississauga East, as a Member of Parliament for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke and CFB Petawawa, training ground of the Warriors, the largest Canadian Forces base in Canada, and as a 14-year veteran of the Standing Committee on National Defence, I welcome the opportunity to participate in any debate regarding the well-being of the women and men who serve Canada in uniform. I mentioned my number of years in service on the Standing Committee of National Defence to highlight the fact that I'm not some Johnny-come-lately when it comes to interest in the care of our soldiers. I witnessed firsthand the decade of darkness, and I'm proud to say that I voted with my Conservative government and our Prime Minister to reverse that decade of neglect. And I've watched in disgust every time our soldiers and veterans have been made into political footballs and kicked around by the opposition. The worst example of our women and men in uniform was the decision by the Liberal Party to use the military procurement for partisan purposes and send our soldiers into Afghanistan without the proper equipment. The cancelling of the EH-101 military helicopter contract for partisan political reasons cost the precious lives of Canadian soldiers. It's a fact that once our Conservative government provided the strategic lift for our soldiers to get our soldiers off the ground and away from the IEDs that lined the roads of Afghanistan, the casualty rate dropped. And let us be clear, on behalf of all Canadians, the current official opposition, regardless of what they say, do not believe Canada should have an armed military. So pardon me, Mr. Speaker, if I sound cynical every time the Leader of the Opposition invokes the name of our soldiers and veterans and tries to embarrass our government. I'm prepared to accept, at face value, the motion of the member for Chateauguay St. Constant to work with all members of Parliament to improve the lives of our soldiers and veterans as long as the politics is taken out of the discussion and let facts guide the way to our decision-making. I recognize that government is not perfect and there is always room for improvement. My riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke is served with a Veterans Affairs Office in Pembroke and a sister office, an Integrated Personnel Support, IPSU, at Base Petawawa. And unlike the offices that are being closed, the Pembroke office is a very busy, high-tempo shop with 29 staff members. Caseload in this office is split between traditional Veterans Affairs and the client and newer rehabilitation cases of more recent D&D veterans. Veterans Affairs and D&D work together through the Integrated Personnel Support Centre to help the Canadian Armed Forces personnel, regular as well as reserve, their veterans and their families to achieve a successful transition from military to civilian life. IPSCs were founded on the principle that early intervention makes a difference in recovering from illness or injuries and successfully reestablishing civilian life. The IPSC at Base Petawawa provides support to Canadian Armed Forces, ill and injured personnel, veterans, and their families with a focus on the following core functions: the return to work program coordination, casualty support outreach delivery, casualty tracking, casualty administration and advocacy services, support platoon structure to provide military leadership supervision and administration support, and a liaison for military family resource centers with local base support representatives and local unit commanding officers. Veterans Affairs collaborates with Department of National Defence to conduct outreach to Canadian Armed Forces personnel, veterans, and their families to provide them with a clear understanding of the number of programs and services and supports available to them. This includes the conducting of transitional interviews with releasing members before they leave the military. Base Petawawa also operates an operational trauma and stress support center. Operational trauma and stress support centers were established to meet the needs of the Canadian Forces members returning from overseas deployments and suffering from tour-related psychological problems. Operational trauma and stress support centers are an initiative designed to complement the full spectrum of high-quality health services the Canadian Armed Forces provide to Canada's military personnel wherever and whenever they serve. This government recognizes the important and selfless contribution of our military men and women. That's why I've worked hard to provide them, together with all my colleagues, with the best health services possible. And because we understand that they are more likely to suffer from operational stress injuries, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, we know that mental health services and support are critical. This is why Veterans Affairs Canada and the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces are working together to ensure that veterans and military members with mental health issues receive the help they need. Significant investment has been made by the Canadian Armed Forces to ensure that our military members receive the highest standard of mental health care possible whenever they serve. And since 2006, the Canadian Armed Forces, the healthcare investment, has increased, bringing our expenses in healthcare to close to $420 million each year. There aren't budget cuts when it comes to caring for our military. In 2012, the government announced an additional $11.4 million investment to enhance the Armed Forces mental health care system specifically. This brings the total amount of annual mental health investment for our military members to $50 million. These investments translate to approximately 400 mental health professionals dedicated to our men and women in uniform. And we're currently working on bringing in additional qualified applicants to fill the spaces available. One of the challenges of having a military base in rural Ontario is the shortage of healthcare professionals for the entire population. Even though the federal Conservative government has struggled to find mental health care professionals for Base Petawawa, we have successfully staffed 5 doctors for a base population of 6,000 soldiers. But compare that to 1 psychiatrist for a local civilian population of 100,000. So we have 5 for the military population of 6,000 and 1 for the remaining 100,000 people in that sector. Is there a healthcare crisis in Renfrew County? Yes. Is the federal government trying to deal with a provincial shortage? Yes. To the family and friends of the military members and veterans who have taken their own lives in the past and in the recent months, I extend my sincere condolences. Every suicide is a tragedy. And as Canadians, we're all affected when one of our Canadian Armed Forces members takes his or her life. And because we know how much they gave to this country, and because Canadians are so proud of our armed forces. Indeed, the Canadian Armed Forces are among the best armed forces in the world. And Mr. Speaker, the health of our military members will always be a priority for the Conservative Government of Canada. The strength of our military organization is its people, and we need to continue to take care of them and their families. Our government is supporting the Canadian Armed Forces and men and women in uniform who are suffering from mental illness. However, I wish to reiterate the role we play in eliminating the stigma around mental health. We all know that what people go through in mental illness is very difficult. So let's encourage people to seek help, because seeking help is the first step to recovery. Thank you.
Before we go to questions and comments, I believe the Honourable Member for Sackville Eastern Shore is standing on a point of order.
Sorry to interrupt the debate, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to clarify something I said earlier in my speech. I made an error. Actually, Kim and Blair Davis are from Lawrencetown, Nova Scotia, not Eastern Passage. I was thinking of someone else. And also, his service was in Bosnia, not Afghanistan. I just wanted to clarify that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for the Yukon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her great speech highlighting a lot of the investments the government has made across all veteran services and, of course, our record investment in the Canadian Armed Forces itself. But we did hear a lot of discussion during debate throughout the day around the points of service and for our veterans. And I wonder if she's experiencing in her riding and if she's heard across other ridings in the country what I know to be the case with the expanded points of service with Service Canada, which is in the Yukon Territory, in Whitehorse, our veterans didn't have an office. And now we're going to receive services for our veterans, not only with all of the work that's currently being done, but now through the addition of a Service Canada point of service for them. And indeed, I'm sure a whole host of other Canadian communities are going to realize some advantages through one of the 600 offices that are being opened. I'm just wondering if she can highlight areas in her region or riding that are going to experience an enhancement of that service where otherwise they had absolutely none in terms of office service delivery. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, we are well served by Veterans Affairs, both in the city of Pembroke, where many retired people live, as well as on the base. However, what I'm learning from veterans in other communities is that they are welcoming the fact that where there was no VAC official available to help counsel them with the services, they will now have it available. And where the closures are occurring, where there were only 10, maybe 20 visits per week at most, in those areas, the workers from Veterans Affairs will go to the homes of the people if there's any distance or any place else that the veteran would like to meet them. So it will be better service one-on-one than before.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for